Mr. Minister, good to see you after APEC.
Yes, good to see you again. Welcome to Malaysia.
Thank you so much. I feel at home here. Having said that, though, Chinese President Xi Jinping is to visit your country very soon. What is your expectation, particularly at this very critical juncture, not only for China and Malaysia, but also for the world?
Yes, well, first of all, we're very happy that President Xi is making time to come to Malaysia. China is a very important trading partner for Malaysia, and it's also one of the largest investor into Malaysia. And especially today, when we have various challenges in the trade front, it's always important that we strengthen and reinforce with all our trading and investment partners, and China, of course, is one of them. So we're looking forward to that. We want to improve on the trade collaboration that we have with China.
And this visit actually is not for the crisis management of the trade situation of the world. It's long earlier committed.
Yes, you're right. I mean, this planned much earlier. And of course, coincidentally, it is happening at a time when the world is facing these new challenges on tariffs. So,
Mr. Minister, I understand the Chinese president is to meet, of course, the Malaysian president, but also at the same time meeting the Malaysian Prime Minister. You are right before this interview off from an important meeting with the Prime Minister. Tell me more about what did you discuss, if you can, and how you are likely to discuss with the Chinese side, especially about the turbulent picture of global trade mechanism these days.
Yes. Well, first of all, as you know, Malaysia is also the chair of ASEAN, right? So we are also in a position where we want to engage all ASEAN member states to be together in this journey towards supporting the principles of multilateralism, especially when it comes to trade. A rule-based multi-trading system is important. And I just chaired a meeting last week with all the ASEAN economic ministers to reinforce the principles of multilateralism, right? So in this case, discussion with the Prime Minister, we want to reinforce our support of the global trading system, the rules-based global trading system. We want to reinforce the position where Malaysia believes in free and fair trade, and China, of course, is an important partner to this. That's one. And on the investment front, China has been a major investor into the region, into ASEAN and into Malaysia. But at the same time, we, as you mentioned, it's turbulent times. So we also want to see how, ASEAN, Malaysia can engage China to mitigate some of this impact. I mean, there's concerns about many by the industries, even all the way up to people who are maybe fearing for their jobs, right? So this is where, how do we look at addressing some of those concerns together?
And particularly this time, the Chinese President Xi, before making the trip to Southeast Asia, he had a big meeting in China talking about shared future with the neighboring countries. Now, earlier there is community of shared future for the world, but this time he particularly highlighted the neighboring countries. How is that being digested in this part of the world? For example, in your work.
Yeah, I think what's important is consistency, consistency in policy, so that people can plan. And what you just said is actually a follow-through of what has been discussed. I mean, Belt and Road Initiative is one, right? It's about strengthening the whole supply chain with neighbors, strengthening the importance of collaboration with neighbors. So, I mean, there are challenges also sometimes, even with neighbors, right? Even with brothers and sisters in families, we have problems. Similarly, when it comes to trade and investments, and also issues about geopolitics, I think for Malaysia and for ASEAN, sometimes there's always discussion about South China Sea, and sometimes there's talking about trade diversion, right? They're talking about whether there will be an indirect impact to the US tariff, etc. So, yes, so the communication channels must be continuously open, and Malaysia and China must always be there to always be open to be discussing these difficult topics as well.
You were at the economic ministers meeting among the ASEAN countries earlier, and I read the 8-point statement afterwards very closely, not only reinforcing the stance on multilateral approach, but also express concerns about the current confusion and chaos. Now, for economies like yours, a trading nation, a developing and emerging economy. How is this, the current one, whether it is between China and the United States, reciprocal tariffs, and also the blanket tariffs by one of the largest economies in the world on the rest of the world, and the changing picture of policy on a day-to-day basis?
Yes, although that's my portfolio, trade, investment, and also industry, but it is what is required is a whole of government approach. If you look at it, that's why we had this meeting earlier with the chaired by the Prime Minister. We activated our National Geo-Economic Command Center, where all the relevant ministries and agencies are there, because
to navigate the tariffs.
Navigate it, because you need a whole of government approach. In fact, when you want to find solution, you need a whole of nation approach, where you have to engage the industries, the other stakeholders that are also affected by the global trade tensions, which the spillover is impacting everyone, right? Impacting global economy, impacting inflation, impacting etc. So we need to make sure that we are ready and try to mitigate this as much as possible. For Malaysia and ASEAN, you mentioned those points that we raised. In fact, I also had a opportunity to talk to Minister Wang, my counterpart in China. We also
the Commerce
Minister of Commerce, where we discuss about what are the areas where we can look at to ensure that our trade between ASEAN and Malaysia, ASEAN and China, and Malaysia and China are not disrupted. And finally, I think what is key to me.
What have you figured out?
Yeah, what I figured out is one thing that is certain is uncertainty.
That is an understatement sometimes. So we hope it is an overstatement. But think about it. You have a master plan, an industry master plan 2030. Yeah. You also have important plans with your tenure, very important on two dimensions. One is semiconductor industry, which is the key for your future growth potential. The other is green, which is also a great growth potential. So at this moment, how will these plans be impacted? Yes. What does that mean for Malaysia?
Yeah. We need to ensure that when we have a strategy to tackle this issue, there's a short-term and medium-term and long-term strategies. And what you just described just now, those are the long-term strategies which we now have to double down. You mentioned the Industrial Master Plan. You're right. We have a National Industrial Master Plan which is targeting 2030 to achieve certain targets. And under that National Industrial Master Plan, there's a National Semiconductor Strategy, and also there's a Green Investment Strategy. These two strategies are the key enablers to achieve what we want to achieve. So we need to double down on ensuring that our fundamentals are strong. Because in the long term, right, we cannot just continue to be dependent on issues that we are facing today. We need to ensure that we strengthen our fundamentals. What do we mean by strengthening our fundamentals? We need to ensure productivity. We have to ensure that we reskill and upskill our people. You're talking about innovation. So these are all important, and we can't do it alone, right? We are in an economy where globally it's so interrelated, right? Interdependent, etc. So this is where we need to continue to strengthen the linkages, but at the same time ensure that our domestic economy is not affected too much by any major global economic shifts.
If I understand, the Prime Minister was also making some latest statements about the turbulence on the trade environment worldwide. He talked about this issue going on between China and the United States on the reciprocal tariffs, but he also talked about when China is impacted, Malaysia will also be, because of the supply chains and many other critical issues. So what does that mean in a way to another level of sophistication of discussion when Chinese President Xi arrives?
I think, yes, definitely what you said is correct. Our Prime Minister have, in his address to the nation, talked about the position of Malaysia versus what's happening globally. Malaysia, together with the rest of the world, will be impacted. So China and the US, the trade tension between the two, you have now tariffs at 145%. There will be a negative impact. It could be first order, it could be second order, it could be direct, it could be indirect, but definitely not just to Malaysia, but to the whole global economy. So this visit is going to be important for Malaysia to share as well our view, our perspective about the impact that it will have not just to Malaysia, but also to Southeast Asia. It is important that we address this earlier than later. Like I said, in the short term, we need to ensure that the economies of Malaysia, the economies of our neighboring countries, the economy of the world are not as impacted in the worst case scenario.
Mr. Minister, as we speak, there are several policies coming out in China over the past few days. Central government has been working on a series of issues to encourage domestic consumption in China. Meanwhile, you also see from private businesses in China, e-commerce platforms, for example, pledge to buy from exporters of China's and to make sure they will be promoted in the domestic market for domestic consumption. For example, Chinese e-commerce giant JD.com has pledged over the next year, from now till the next year, about $27 billion US purchase from Chinese exporters for domestic market. So this is from businesses, and this is only one of those examples. As an important trading partner of China, how does Malaysia make of all these latest policies from China?
Well, we welcome these policies. They will definitely help mitigate some of the potential impact, and the concerns have already been raised. And this is definitely a move in the right direction. I think it's even a proactive move because the concern, not just that there will be flooding of products from China because they can't access US market, but also you must remember that we are all an open economy. So there'll be exporters from, let's say, Indonesia or Vietnam or even Malaysia who, may now have to fight exports from China to the third market, right? So this will help not just the direct but also the indirect impact. So this, I think, is good and positive, and we should work closer with China to see what other ways as well on top of this. And this is a private sector initiative as well, right?
Right. What does this uncertainty mean for our important investment projects already underway, already committed?
Yeah, we have been engaging the investors, especially investors who are investing for exports, right? Because Malaysia economy and the ASEAN economy is big, but to have a certain scale, they use our region and Malaysia as a hub to export to the rest of the world, including US, including even China, right? So they are now assessing. To be fair, I can understand their concerns. So what is, again, it's important that we try and see how the government can also support, because the debate now, like you said in your earlier remarks, things are changing by the day.
Indeed.
Right? So for companies to make a decision, the feedback that we get is still early days. But at the same time, what it does mean that the projects or the investments that have yet to be realized is now being put on hold for them to also understand and price the risk.
Would you see the strategy as to deal with the day-to-day flip-flop possibilities of trade? Or do you see that you and your colleagues have to wait for the long-term result eventually to make changes and also to adjust?
No doubt we will continue to engage. And at the same time, we as a bloc and Malaysia as well will continue to build the bilateral, multilateral relationships with the BRICS, GCC, EU. We have the RCEP with China, Korea, and Japan, Australia, New Zealand, within ASEAN and those 5 countries. So there are many avenues that we need to. We can't just talk about, oh, this is the problem, let's face it, but not do anything else. So everything else have to continue. Like I said earlier, the principles of multilateralism must continue. The principle that we believe in free trade and fair trade must continue. And protectionism or follow a different way of looking at how trade is benefiting the world, I think must be cautioned against.
Right. China and Malaysia have this 2-country twin parks project.
Yes.
And that has a lot to do with the tremendous investment into this country.
Yes.
Because it's a double commitment from both sides. Right. How is that going so far, even amid all these changes?
We are very optimistic that during this visit we are going to upgrade the park even more. And I believe, I don't want to jump the gun yet, but there will be more than just one twin park. We are looking at Malaysia having more than one twin park with China, and the existing twin park that we have today, we are going to upgrade it to a much bigger, much more sophisticated, new industries will also be involved. You're talking about AI, you're talking about new technology.
I would love to jump into some of this area, Mr. Minister. For example, about digitalization and AI. How do you see, especially after DeepSeek, providing alternative to the world about AI, that it's not going to be just a scaling law and gigantic investment, but everybody can have a role on the platform? What does that mean for Malaysia?
When we talk about artificial intelligence or we talk about new technology, what we want it to be is a technology that is inclusive, right? You know, if the technology is just for those big companies or those who are able to find the resources to adopt, then it's difficult. So with DeepSeek and many more coming, it will allow even small companies, the SMEs, even the micro SMEs, to adopt AI. I think this is where it's important, because when you talk about global peace, global prosperity, global stability, we have to have a policy that is inclusive, and we need to make sure that those tools are inclusive, the enablers are inclusive, and AI is one enabler.
You earlier talked about the mechanisms, for example, RCEP.
Yes.
For example, China-ASEAN Free Trade Agreement, and the list that goes on. How do you see, even at this turbulent time, these mechanisms can function, and probably can even function beyond our earlier expectations?
In fact, we should look at, like I said, apart from doubling down on our plans, we should also double down on the importance of free trade agreements. As chair of ASEAN this year, one of our priority economic deliverables, one of our target, we call it the PEDs, for the leaders to agree on by October, is to upgrade the ATIGA, the ASEAN Trade and Goods Agreement, with China. So improving what we already have. That's one. So that's something that we're really focusing on, not just with China, also with India, but I'm very optimistic that with China one, it will be completed.
How is Malaysia skillfully being pragmatic amid all these changes? And that has a lot to do with your work, Mr. Minister.
Well, it's our Prime Minister's work. We are here to support our Prime Minister, to support the government. I think we are all working as a team, which is important, and we continue to be neutral in many of our decisions. In fact, in all our decisions, we are looking at neutral. We don't look at, look at decision based not on a principle. So it has to be a principle, and it's some issues based on what is good for Malaysia, right? If we look at it objectively, but at the same time, for ASEAN as well, we need to continue with support. I think the ASEAN neutrality, the ASEAN centrality. That's why Malaysia will always engage together with ASEAN and with other blocs. We're going to have the ASEAN GCC China in May. Premier Lee Chang is also attending, right? So this is important to continue engagement with the rest of the world. So we cannot be distracted with what we have already planned earlier, even before all these challenges was brought up.
It's wonderful to learn about these assurances. Having said that, though, we also understand that there will be, Malaysia's partnership country with the BRICS, and Malaysia has been very active in different mechanisms. Recently, we understand there has been analysts suggesting emerging and developing economies are most vulnerable to these changes about the global trade, because, as they argue, our economies tend to be less flexible, and we have been growing up amid globalization, our economy taking off during this time, and therefore how to learn the other way might be tricky. This is, of course, their arguments. Mr. Minister, do you see that is the case? How would emerging economies, developing countries, in other words, Global South, be able to strengthen ourselves and navigate the water?
Well, if you look at how the global economy have grown in the past, it's built on the foundation that we require a global rule-based order, right? We've seen many less developed countries become new developed countries. We've seen how GDP per capita, GNI per capita of countries growing over time because of trade, right? Trade brings in, prosperity and also peace and stability, right? So we've always been, a strong believer that this is what brought, the current economic order is what has brought the global economy to where it is today. Of course, that notion has been challenged, and of course, along the way, there's always been challenges, right? And for less developed countries, they still need time, emerging economies as well, and developing countries like Malaysia as well, right? So, we have all our own set of challenges. But what's important is we need to stay the course, and that's why in our statement by the Prime Minister and also the statement by ASEAN that we still believe in the principle of multilateralism.